Emila. Hello, good morning, everybody. So this is a session on women's safety online. And with me here, we have Irene Kiwia, Tanzanian Woman of Achievement. We have Patricia Tuasima from Chapter 4, Uganda. My name is Betty Abba from Sea Hope, Nigeria. I'm the moderator for this session. And we have Francois Mukuku from DRC Congo. And of course, we have Emila Gandhi from Facebook. So we're going to be dealing the next 1 hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes. The next 1 hour on women's safety online. Of course, I listened to some of the remarks in the earlier session, and there are some areas of convergence on what you're about to discuss. The fact that women are much more threatened now, offline as well as online, more than ever before. We thought that with civilization, the internet age, that things would be better, but we are having a progressive trend of traditional biases, the same things that have threatened women offline, coming online. We've seen issues with women having accessibility concern, issues of not having technology, and now women facing real danger. For instance, in Nigeria, about 5 years ago, a young undergraduate was killed, a young lady. She was lured into Lagos State from her school by her Facebook contacts and killed. It was directly as a result of her being on Facebook and, of course, her being a beautiful young woman. Recently, we've had the issue of one of the most powerful traditional rulers in Nigeria. He separated from his wife, or his wife walked out of his life, and the marriage is just 17 months. But guess what? The bulk of the online criticism is targeted at the woman. She's currently, it just happened about a month ago. The bulk of online jokes, cyberbullying, slut shaming, and very little attention paid to the man. It has to do directly, it actually arises from the fact that she's a woman, and I'm sure she's also afraid for her life. A lot of intense scrutiny on her, and nobody is asking what were the real issues. One of Nigeria's biggest blogger actually is a constant target of cyberbullying. And people who should have no business with her single status keep asking why she's not married, even though she's that rich. And last year, she had to actually drag someone to the police because there were threats to her life. So women continue to face a lot of threats. And what can we do about this trend? How can it be mitigated? What kind of advocacy tools can we explore to ensure that women are safer than they are today? We've had issues over the years, over the ages, of women being threatened. Violence against women is transcending online, and women are becoming progressively threatened. What can be done? So I would really appreciate if we have a very, very interactive session. So can we hear from you, Irene? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be here. Well, I've worked with women and girls for over 8 years now in transformation empowerment through mentorship, role modeling, and capacity building. And through my work, violence against women continue to be a big challenge. Which is also surprising, given that in 1995, over 53 countries, African countries, did make an agreement to a commitment to adhere to African Union's protocol on the rights of African women. So, but this continues to be a challenge, and yes, it can be, it's underlined by our cultural and traditions. It's underlined by historically how we have been brought up, forced marriage, dowry-related violence, and sexual harassment, intimidation. All these continue to be a challenge, and they have a huge impact on women, on trauma, injuries, HIV and AIDS infection, and even death. So with the growth of the internet, this has now taken a different turn. And the challenge is people do not take violence against women online serious. It's not been regarded as something that is impactful. So I think the challenge starts there, to educate the communities, that violence against women online is a serious issue. We see people being violated online, being harassed, being bullied, but even their friends and families are not taking it serious. So you can imagine authorities and the police and etc. So the big issue is first on sensitization, making sure that we advocate for online rights for women, we educate communities that this is actually a very serious issue, and also giving women tools that they can use to protect themselves. For example, the conversation that was taking place earlier on freedom of expression, where we are free to portray ourselves the way that we want. And like Asha from Tanzania mentioned, women are curvy and beautiful, so you don't even have to post a naked photo to appear attractive or pornographic in that sense. But how do we educate women, especially young girls, on how they can protect themselves online? I'm glad we have someone from Facebook here. How to use the safety features when you're using online platforms, and another underlying issue is the issue of poverty. I think sexual violence, gender-based violence, has a lot of ties to poverty. A lot of women are not voicing out or are not coming out because they continue to stay in abusive relationship because of their economic situation. So how we advocate for economic empowerment online and offline by educating communities that the internet is actually a very empowering tool, and by giving, creating platforms that women and girls can use to empower themselves and change their economic status so that they can liberate themselves socially and economically. So for me, I think the challenge is with all internet stakeholders, ISPs, mobile network operators, the government, websites and app developers on how we change this status quo by creating platforms and tools that, first of all, will advocate for safety and will also give women and girls things to use for their own empowerment.
Thank you very much. I think what I get from that clearly is that to mitigate, to reduce the online threat against women, one of the answers is to empower women so they can have a more empowered status online. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Cynthia, Patricia, sorry.
So I think first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that the internet does not exist in a vacuum, right? That it's deeply a representation of what happens in our offline spaces. And so the deep patriarchal society that we live in is very much the same online as it is offline. And so what happens is that the difference is that because of the anonymity of online, the violence is somewhat amplified, but women are experiencing the exact same things online, right? Like the slut shaming, just the insults, and for me, all these are really just from a place of the need to continuously silence and police women. And I think for me, it's really important that in all discussions about women's safety online, we acknowledge where these threats often come from, right? And so for me, it's really important, first of all, highlight that. So the trends, I don't think that there's any new trend per se, because I think that the threats are all the same. Cyber stalking, just like surveillance, the slut shaming, the revenge pornography. We've been seeing it since the internet came into existence, and it's just continuous, it's continuous. And for me, coming from Uganda, what I'm seeing now is that there's now a force of pushback, which is extremely just inspiring, especially coming from young feminists who are saying, we're not standing for this anymore, this needs to stop, this must stop. And so those trends are interesting to note and see, even when there's this false nostalgia about people saying, I miss the days when the internet was so fun. And what that means is that they miss the days when there was zero accountability and you could go online and slut shame and say everything and nobody would hold you accountable. Right now, what we're saying for me back home is that you cannot say something problematic without getting slapped on your wrist, without someone saying, that's nonsense, don't say that. So it's really inspiring to see, but it does not take away from what is still the reality. And when we talk about just manifestations of violence, it's also extremely important that we realize that women experience violence differently. So trans women do not experience violence the way cis women experience violence, for example. And so I do think that it's extremely important to make those distinctions when we're just talking about how this violence manifests. In terms of how do we, what actions can we take, or how do we end this violence? I think one of the interesting questions to ask also is, who is sitting in the room making these policies? Who heads these social media sites? Who then can control what is deemed violent or what is deemed not violent? And for me, in a room of majority of men who continue to say that's not, who continue to not understand just what women view as violent, it becomes difficult to have an honest conversations about reporting mechanisms, because oftentimes I've had men say to me, listen, I don't see how that's offensive, and I say, it's not offensive to you, but listen, I'm telling you, I'm a woman, and this is why it's offensive to me. So when women are not in these rooms making these policies and making these guidelines, I really just don't see how we can sort of mitigate these issues. Yeah, so that's basically where I'm at right now.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly.
Yes, I just want to build on what Irene and Patricia just say. And I was thinking about the new trend, because they asked us to also explore that. So I don't think there's a new trend when it's come to what form of violence that women are facing online, but some trends are more linked to the context. Like before, I think, Patricia, you said that the offline and online were like they're separate. But now we see that, oh, thank you. Now we see that more and more they're merging, like with the DDoSing. You have the threats that you have online that follow you also offline. You have all your personal data disclosed online, and you have people calling you and sending packages at your house. So that's a new trend, although the violence is old. And also in Africa, because of the the context of election. I think many countries are going through election, so more and more women are being threatened because of their political engagement. So this is a trend that I see that is really linked to the context more than to the form of violence that women are facing online. Also, I wanted to tackle the subject of privacy from design. When I see that WhatsApp or some of the most popular applications that women and girls are using, they don't have privacy from design. You know, like on WhatsApp, you can just email your conversation to anyone you want before the other party knowing that you are sending it to a third person. So I think these are also the conversation we need to have. I think we don't, we are not saying that everything should be safe, everything should be encrypted or what, but having also the conversation about the infrastructure itself is not always gender neutral, about what I call privacy from design, how the designer are presenting those applications that are popular. We know that there are more safer applications, but unfortunately they are not popular. So these are also the conversation we need to have when we are talking about violence online, but especially violence against women, because knowing our African context, we know the difficulties that women are facing already offline, the lack of autonomy, the lack of all the moral values and what. So we need really to be also sensitive about that.
Okay, Emila, would you want to acquaint us with the steps taken so far by Facebook to ensure that women have as much as possible, women are as safe as much as possible online, women who use Facebook, the Facebook platform?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Henriette. Okay, thanks for organizing this conversation on safety. So at Facebook, we really take safety of our users seriously, and it's at the heart of what we do and at the heart of everything that we do. And what are some of the things that we are doing? Of course, there is room for improvement, but we approach safety through 4 ways, through a 4-pronged approach. And the first is the policies. And I know I'll start to sound like a broken record, but the policies that we have define how we also approach safety. Community standards. So most of us are on the platform, but do we know what the community standards are and what it is and what you cannot post on the platform? We also have invested in reporting, in a reporting structure. And how our reporting works, someone said to me yesterday, I reported something and I never got feedback. When you report something to us, you get feedback on the progress of your report, and we always close the loop. So if you ever report something on being harassed online, you are guaranteed that you get the feedback. It might not be the feedback that you want, but you always get feedback from us. We also engage, the third thing is that we always engage in outreach and awareness, not just with women organizations, but with different sections of the users of our platforms. We also engage with policymakers and think tanks so that we can improve and innovate on how we can approach safety and in an effort to be an industry leader in safety. So that's really what we do. But I'm hoping also that this conversation that we are having now doesn't become just theoretical and mourning and complaining, but what are the practical tools that we can actually do to keep ourselves safe, with us reminding ourselves that safety is a shared responsibility. We all are responsible for our own safety, not just Facebook, not just technology companies, but as women's rights organizations, as activists, as LGBTIQ organizations, as academics, what are we doing? What are you doing as part, to ensure your safety online? So I hope we can also have a conversation around that.
Okay, just a follow-up question before, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions after this. I cited the instance of the young lady who was murdered in Nigeria as a direct consequence of her being on Facebook and getting in touch with friends, so-called friends, who lured her to Lagos, drugged her in a hotel room and raped her to death. When you get news of such tragic occurrence, how does Facebook react? Does Facebook, because I haven't heard much from Facebook as a result of this, even though the news was all over, and just about 6 months ago, the suspects were given, I think, death sentence, 2 of the suspects. And so, does Facebook go ahead to engage potential victims to try to ensure more safeguard policies, to try to ensure more sensitization, to try to prevent such occurrences? I know that Facebook has a number of activities in Nigeria, but I haven't heard Facebook, or I'm not aware that Facebook took any direct action as a result of this occurrence.
I'm sorry to hear about the lady who lost her life, but I'm also interested to know what you would have wanted Facebook to do in that case.
Like engaging, I know that Facebook is involved in a number of social activities in Nigeria, engaging young audience, potential victims like her, kind of spreading sensitization. Does Facebook do that?
Yes, we do, and this is what I've just been talking about. So we do work with different categories of people, not potential victims. I would not want to be viewed as a potential victim, as a woman who believes that I'm a strong woman. I don't want to be viewed as a victim, and I'm sure most women would not want to be viewed as victims. But we are doing quite a number of initiatives. One, raising awareness on how you can keep yourself safe. But we should also note that what happens in society offline also mirrors what happens online. So it does not mean that someone who is a murderer or a thief offline then becomes a pastor when they are on our platforms. And we also cannot take the role of law enforcement agencies. We are a social media company. We cannot take a role that is assigned to other people. We're not a law enforcement agency. So there are some things that we can do, but we cannot do it all by ourselves. We have to work together. And it'll be, we can talk offline about this case if needed.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to the questions and then we'll have more interaction around the topic, I want to state categorically that at the root of much of the online safety concerns we have, the needs that women witness online, is this issue of patriarchy in the society, is this issue of the discrimination, the bias against women. Like I cited the instance of Nigeria's richest blogger, who is constantly the target of cyberbullying. The fact that she's not married at 35 or 36. If she were a male, of course, nobody would bother to ask him, why are you not married at 36? She buys a car today and then all her page is flogged by comments. You are buying a car of 10 million naira and you are not yet married. And all of that. And then we have all kinds of related incidences. So for us to be really be able to mitigate this, to see an end or at least a reduction in online attacks against women, we really, whatever tools, whatever solutions we're going to proffer, we have to target this root of patriarchy in the society. Because I've discovered that, patriarchal tendencies, discrimination, biases against women cuts across socio-economic classes, cuts across educational status. You have some of the most educated people, and yet they are the people that are so much biased against women because they've been socialized to think that a woman at 36 ought to be married, even whether you want to marry or not, whether you found the right person or not. And so when you become a celebrity, you become the focus of intense scrutiny, intense cyberbullying. And so I think it's something that we really have to bear in mind. I don't know if you have more comments before we take questions. You wanted to say something, Neke?
Well, scrutiny like that is not just online. it also happens offline.
Yeah.
If you have a child before marriage, you're scrutinized with your community. If you get a divorce, you're scrutinized with your community. It's just that online, it's seen and shared by more people. So I think, again, I'm all about self-empowerment, and the power is for the women. I mean, we need to change that narrative and to start showcasing ourselves in a different way and to start standing up for each other. And to start advocating for a different type of story. I don't know if I'm making sense, but we need to change the norms, the social norms that these types of bullying and these types of scrutiny are based in. I am a mother of 3 kids who happen to have 2 different fathers. I am not married. I'm 37, and this is my story. I own it. Deal with it. I will not, you can go on my page and comment and say whatever you want, but here I am. I'm a CEO of my company. I have 3 businesses, and that's the story that I'm putting out there, and in no time, you're going to have to change your perception of it. And this is what I mean when I say changing the narrative and advocating and promoting each other as women, but also as civil society, as stakeholders. I mean, how are we portraying women in different aspects of our communities? How are we engaging them? When we're developing platforms and programs, are we considering how it affects women? I was reading something last week about how car safety, when they were producing when they were developing, what are they called? The airbags, they didn't consider women bodies. So a lot of women die in car crashes because the airbag is not molded for our curvy, bootylicious selves. So and this goes across platforms, across issues. So the challenge is with all of us. It's not just Facebook or Google, and it's also about its context and content. The challenge for Africa is an economic challenge. What are we doing to produce and develop things that will empower us? Technology platforms that will empower us, technology tools that will help us change our economic status. Yes, it's great to have all these platforms to interact, but how are we using those platforms to engage in economic activities? And this goes to each one of us as citizens, as Africans, as stakeholders. Like, how are we using the space that we have to promote economic empowerment, and that way changing the context of some narratives that are degrading?
Can I just add on?
Okay, let's make it 1 minute each.
Yeah.
Because
So I
we're
just-
anticipating a lot of questions.
Yeah, I just, to speak to what Emily was saying about just being responsible for your own safety and things like that, and just being personally accountable. So just to share what has worked, for example, in my country, is that a collection of just young feminists, about 10 or so, just came together and said, listen, enough is enough, and we need to do something about this just absurd violence against women online. And so we began, it was just really simple things like hashtags, like that were just calling out manos, and if you came on and you were like slut shaming or you were color shaming, you would just be quickly just bombarded by like 10 people saying that's BS, take it down, take it down. And the reaction, of course, was just like anti-everything, and everyone was like, you're such killjoys and blah, blah, blah. But increasingly, it's so interesting to realize now, before I came, there was an advert that was just extremely disgusting, that was and very sexist. And it was so interesting to see the reaction online. And the advert actually is going to get taken down. But because of that online pressure, and because women were saying, this objectification of women is what perpetuates the violence, so how dare you put such an advert? And that has been as a result of just like the constant force of feminists saying this is not how we're going to be portrayed. So I do realize that it is on us, but it's also really for the service providers to try and make these platforms as safe as they can be. For example, Facebook, I know that, I'm sorry for like seemingly picking on you. So, for example, Facebook, I know that there was a woman's page. So this woman, and I think the Facebook page was Men Who Hate Women, and she was just really reporting, picking different images, different graphical images, and different comments from specific men that were portraying misogyny, yeah? And her account was suspended 4 times, but the original posts were never taken down, right? So I think it's those double standards that make even reporting a lot harder. And I know it's obviously an ongoing conversation that we just can't like fix like this, but I do think that it's also important to acknowledge that service providers need just to do a lot more.
Yeah, I want also to say that protecting your own safety online is just one side of the coin, because even people who are offline have also the right infringe online. So it's really important that providers, as you said, also have a measure in place. And also law enforcers. Unfortunately, in our countries, most of them don't understand how technology works, and they don't have like effective measure to counter it. But there's also a lot to do in that part too. Yeah.
Okay. You have a comment before we go to the audience?
No comment.
Okay, so can we take questions, about 5 questions? Okay. 1, 2, 3. How many hands do we have up? 1, 2, 3. Okay.
My name is Sadiq Alabi. I'm from Nigeria. My question goes to those of you talking about Facebook and what Facebook can do to improve safety and that online, because I would like you to give specifics that you would like Facebook to do, so that it's not just complaining about platform not doing enough, but we need to propose probably alternative or solutions to the problem. The way I see social media is that users have great responsibility on what they do online. So maybe Facebook could, another service provider could engage in more user education. But beyond this, I really don't, whatever decision you now take after that online, you should own it as adults. Besides the sexual issue, assault online and harassment, there are other things going on, like people are starting business relationship from Facebook, Twitter, and stuff like that. There are good experience, there are bad experience. I've had both. I've had a client, we met online, and then I did a job for the person, and he never paid me. Personally, I don't see what Facebook can do to help in that regard. I made a decision not to do better due diligence, so that's on me. And I've had people who paid me for service rendered through social media. So I just want to know what you think Facebook and other social media platforms can do to improve safety on their platform.
Do you want to take the question now? Emila?
It's not directed to me. It's for the other panelists.
Okay. Okay, maybe we should take the questions. All
Yeah,
the
thank
questions. Okay.
Hello, my name is Fiona Songa from Kenya. Just, I think, additional information that would help this conversation. In 2015, the World Wide Web undertook a study of 10 African countries to assess women's rights online and issues of access. And I think some of the things that we need to take note of that affect, and I tend to agree with this report, that affect our ability as women to even protect ourselves online are the issues of education. More educated women tend to use the internet better than the less educated women. And that is because their levels of education empower them to be able to then use the technology appropriately. Younger women tend to find it easier to get online than the older women, so the issue of age comes into play. Then the levels of income that women have, basically this doesn't even apply to women, it's everybody in society. If you don't have that additional income to spend on getting online, priorities in our region are food, shelter, clothing. The internet becomes a secondary issue in as far as addressing our basic needs are concerned. So then, if we want to be able to even empower the women to use the internet more and to use it positively, then there's a lot of work that has to be done by different NGOs and civil society groups to be able to get that woman to the right level in terms of her education, regardless of age, in terms of her income level. So that means that NGOs that are involved in activities that are income generating are doing a positive activities in terms of empowering the women then to get online. And that way then when the woman gets online, she's able to use the internet much more meaningfully than the men, because the women who have better income actually use the internet. 50% of them use the internet in a very positive manner that is able to generate for them more income. Then of course there are issues of civic engagement and political participation. These are some of the issues that also drive women to get online. When you are a woman who's running for a position as a member of parliament or basically representation position within different government structures, you find more women are going online to talk to other women, to reach out to their population, to be able to make a difference in terms of their participation online. And with all these issues that you have already raised of patriarchy still come into play. Why? Because if ordinarily, and this is a very common scenario amongst ordinary African families in the village, the man will buy himself a smartphone, he'll buy the woman just a simple phone. That in itself is wrong. The woman should also be able to get a smartphone. When she gets a smartphone, she's able to get online and to do more, because that affects her ability to access ICT infrastructure and information, because then she's able to get more information. And then also the issues of being able to know what to look for and where to find that information has an impact on whether or not women will be. When women go online to look for issues affecting women, there's very little information from our region on what women are doing to address our issues of childbearing, of ethics, and all some of the things you're raising, because we don't seem to be sharing that information on the online platforms where it can be publicly available. The way that we were raised by our parents, our grandmothers and aunties, and the advice the aunties give the women and the girls, it's still done within those very local arrangements, but it doesn't get online. Yet, if it got online, it would also be a mechanism that draws more women online and to be able to share ideas and to use the internet more and empower them to then be able to defend their rights. Because when you're empowered, when you know what that your involvement means, then you're able to protect yourself. Thank you. Just a comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this discussion. I might be not quite liked in this room after this comment, but I'm keen to hear everybody's thoughts. We in civil society, we talk a lot, we raise a lot of money, we travel a lot to empower women. And I'm keen to hear from the room, are we doing enough to empower men from a young age to treat women correctly? You know, when it comes to tech giants, we're very quick to blame them or to say to them, you should make your product safer for women. But are we doing the same in terms of going to young boys and saying to them, this is how you actually treat women properly? That's my question to the panel. If you think we as civil society are doing enough work to educate young boys and men. Thank you.
My question is about this constant, it's a push and pull. You know, sometimes digital security experts will say it's your responsibility to share what's responsible, quote unquote. Like, go online knowing that it's an unsafe space and that you shouldn't put everything about yourself out there. At the same time, there is a feminist desire to be free, a feminist desire to say, hey, I can put my content out there. It's mine, I own it. It shouldn't be used against me in any way. My body or my expression online is mine, and this is part of me. And so it's an identity, it's a stamping of your identity and a stamping of space. And I always find that there is this, we never get to a point where we actually get to consensus about what women should do online. I mean, fine, it's a freedom, you should do what you want to do, but then there's always that undertone of do what you want, but if your stuff gets out of hand, don't blame other people for shaming you or whatever it is. But at the same time, we're saying, well, we should be free to celebrate who we are. So that's kind of my question. Where do you locate yourselves in that conversation?
Okay, last question.
It's not really a question, but it's more of a follow-up to the lady who had asked what the civil society is doing to groom young boys to become women empowered. So I would first like to call out the organizers, because I feel like it's one of the things that we're really forgetting, feminists, air quotes. Why isn't there a man on that panel? I feel that it's really, as long as we're talking about women empowerment, we do need to involve the men. We do need to hear what men think of this whole situation and what their role can be or advance to. So just a food for thought for the other organizers. Hopefully there'll be other forums. Don't forget the men on the panels, okay?
Okay.
There's one hand.
There's one hand. Okay. You want to ask a question?
I would just suggest that I think that perspective is already well represented. And what's telling is that male perspectives exist in any conversations about general policing of online spaces. And so this is an opportunity where it's set aside to hear different perspectives. Should there be one man on the panel? Probably, I don't know, I'm not gonna get into the politics, but I'll let other people decide. But I just wanna offer that this is really helpful, and I'm writing down a lot of what you're saying about patriarchy offline and being online. I'm finding this very helpful to have a female space that we can listen to and peer into.
I think we have like 5 minutes left.
Okay, just a minute before you answer. I'm sure the questions are over. Okay, just to respond to that last observation, not just about the man on the panel now. They need to bring in, to engage boys, men, on the need for women's safety, women empowerment, women's rights, to reduce violence against women. I run an NGO and work with young persons in the slums. And sometimes in January, we started in a new area. And our biggest program so far has been our Girl Empowerment Club. We work with young mothers, teenagers, at-risk girls. And then almost every time we have a major program, I have a group of boys approaching me and saying, why are you excluding us boys? Why are you excluding us boys? Then we went to a village and started a club in January. We had about 100 participants, and about maybe 20% of them were boys. And so we came out and said, okay, if you want to be a member of the girls' club, come out and put down your name. And the boys also lined up and said they wanted to be members of the girls' club. Because somehow they are feeling marginalized. Somehow they are feeling that nobody is talking to them. So at the end of the day, you have boys with a lot of sexist sentiments, tendencies. You have boys that are not groomed. And so we're spending so much resources, like you said, empowering women, sensitizing women, capacity building, and we are not doing as much for boys, especially to be gender sensitive. I think it's a major area that we really have to look into. So my co-panelists will have some points to make.
I wanted to react quickly, but I've sort of, yeah. I think why are men not part of this panel? They are there and they can participate from there. I think it's fine that they can participate from there. Yes, we're talking about experiences that women are having. They can talk about it from there. The stage currently is for women, and I think that's okay. Yes, and the men can, and I think, for me, I think they can participate, and they have been participating, really. And when we talk about online safety, we are not just saying we're talking about it for women. We talked about online safety also yesterday. We talk about safety every day, but for this particular 45 minutes, it's online safety for women. Yeah, and men can participate from there. Yeah.
Right, and I just, to respond really to the questions and comments. So listen, this could be a very unpopular opinion, but I, for one, do not think that men are in any way marginalized. I think to say that is to sort of be like the people who respond all lives matter when we say Black Lives Matter, which is very problematic, because you need to contextualize conversations about like people who have been for so long discriminated against or who are minorities. And so I think that when there is a space for women, which, and by the way, to be honest, these spaces are not very many, if we are going to be very realistic, to have a space where women can share their personal experiences and to insist that that space must also be dominated or should have people who have a lot more space is, I think, very problematic in conversations like this. But yeah, do we need to have men, to teach men to be better human beings? I mean, that's really the question. Should we be teaching men to be better human beings? Should we be teaching men to respect that women need to be treated with respect? I think that we all have a duty, of course, right? And for me, so for me, what I do in my personal experience is that I have two brothers, and I say, listen, this is not, and so I do that, I do my bit. But in my daily activism is not centered on teaching men to be better human beings. It's centered on women, really, because they're my focus group, and I think that's okay. So I think that if you see a vacuum and you say, listen, I want to do this, do that, but feminists who decide and say, my focus is on women, I think that's okay as well. Someone asked about what can Facebook do, blah, blah, blah. I don't have like a specific answer, but I would just like to speak, for example, to reporting, like how you report and what is considered hate speech and what is considered unworthy to be on these sites is, for me, what I'm really speaking to. Because, for example, on Twitter, when you're going to report it and say this thing is offensive to me, blah, 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 the way you report it is just like, it's such a tiring process. You must report one tweet at a time, and sometimes it's like a context issue, right? And oftentimes I've realized that when somebody, for example, says, oh, you slut, sometimes that's not perceived as necessarily offensive in the regulations. And for me, I think that perhaps one of the ways to change that would go back and say, what actually is offensive? Because what is offensive may not necessarily be like someone coming out and say, I will kill you. And so I think that we need to just go back and talk about what is considered offensive and not, because for me, that's where the problem lies, is that it's extremely hard to report because what Facebook and Twitter consider offensive are like the parameters for offense are very limited, I think, in my experience at least. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would just like to add on to what there's a lady who spoke about room to have more platforms that empowers and supports women. And I would like to talk about a platform that we launched this year in August in Tanzania called Twaa. I mentioned it a bit yesterday, but it's a learning and mentoring platform for women and girls in Africa. And what it has is it allows young girls to get mentored by women in different categories across countries. And so girls can select among a pool of women in agriculture, technology, in all sectors really, and in all countries. We also have learning in 5 thematics, technology, innovation, business development, personal development, health and fashion and beauty, that is curated for a 21st century girl in an African setting. So just making sure that there's enough content that caters to African setting. It has a counseling feature where, women and girls can go in and get counseling support, of any form, and goal setting feature that allows you to put your goals and share it with your mentor and have them help you modify it, etc. It's new, and I'm urging all of you to look it up and help spread word. But these are some of the innovations that are already happening in Africa, for Africa, by African women. Hello. And there's enough room for more. There's enough room to do more. So that's one. And to respond to the point on how what women should. So how boys? How do we empower boys? I work for my daily work is women and girls. At home, I'm a mother to 3 boys, and I think boys, especially young boys, learn from examples. You can tell them everything, but what will really impart knowledge on them is what they see and how the societies and communities evolve. So by empowering women and changing that narrative and changing those norms, our boys are seeing that and are learning, and it's shaping who they are going to become. And because we have been discriminated for so many years, there is such a huge vacuum that still needs to be filled. I mean, in my work, I started a communication company 12 years ago, and I still don't get paid enough as my male counterparts. So my agency, it has been growing organically, but my male, peers get paid more. And here I am, educated, empowered, etc. So there is so much work to be done. There is still a lot of work. We're not halfway there. And it's okay to focus on us, and the community will learn and see and shape accordingly. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, maybe I will start by a quote to say that if internet is safe for women and girls, then it's safe for everybody. So I'm kind of, yes. So I wanted to react to the sister from Kenya who asked or contributed around age and education level and all these things. I think, at least in my context, that plays, have an impact when it's come to access. But when you are talking about violence against women, then age, level of education, and all this stuff is not really important, because every girl and women of every walks of life a potential victim. So I think it starts by the consent we give when we start our account on the various application we are using. Sometimes they are broad, they are complex, we don't even understand what we are consenting to. So we should also have that in mind. It's also really about how women's rights are respected offline, because internet is just reproducing the same thing we are living offline. So if women are talking about subjects that it seems to not be a subject for women, then they will be bullied online, so they will face all sorts of violence. So for me, when it comes to violence against women, everybody is a potential victim, but we are talking about girls and women because of the agency, because of the autonomy, because of the burden that they have to bear when they are online and the society is scrutinizing them or judging them. So, as I said before, if internet is safe for women and girls, then it's safe for everybody.
Thank you. Okay.
Just quickly going back to what you said about Twitter and Facebook, I cannot really speak about Twitter, but on Facebook you can report a page, you can report a comment, you can report someone's profile. Yes, and the community standards are very, very clear on what you can report on and what the process is. And the reporting process really is not difficult. And I'm happy that in this event, there are 3 people from Facebook. There's Fadzai at the back, and there's also Alex, who might not be in this room. And we are available. I've just volunteered them to help, really, if you want just to see how you can do some of that. Because most of the people, sometimes we complain, but we've not even had an opportunity or just to report when something happens. Yesterday I mentioned that we do not actively monitor people's accounts, and really you have to report if something happens to you, if there's harassment and all that. Are we doing conclusions or?
No.
Yeah, just answering the questions. I don't think there were questions that were. Yours is not answered. What was your question, Fungai? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so at Facebook, we don't approach safety that way, that, you are on your own, just, it's wild, wild west. You do whatever you want to do and be careful. There are some sharks on. That's not how we do it. And this is what I've been explaining. And I know you work for APC as well, and there are different initiatives that you are working on, Feminist Internet, African Declaration. And as a tech company, we are also working with different experts to improve even our policies on how we approach safety. And it will be good to have feedback from you if there are issues that you see on our platform. And I think that's it from me.
Okay. Before you have a comment.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that. I think, and this is my opinion, that the fact that the internet and social media is still, it's like a new thing still. There's a lot of miseducation for users on what the impact of what they share could have on their lives, especially young girls, again, coming back to girls. So there's room to engage more and explain, yes, you are free to share what you want to share, but, while you share, know that there's consequence. Things could come out of that. So be responsible on what you share online and what the impact of that is. There's room there where civil society and stakeholders can put more efforts to education on what's the right way to use the internet, what's the right things to share, or you can share whatever, but what are could be the consequences, while everything else, policies and sanctions are working to align. I mean, it's going to take a while before everything is 100% perfect, but meanwhile, things need to happen.
Okay.
Microphone, please.
I was just saying, can I just give an offline example? Because I'm just also trying to make sense of this in an online world or in an online reality, where in the offline world, there's this conversation about, for instance, dress, miniskirts. So one side of the argument will say, hey, you know what? You know that men can't control themselves. You're going into a dangerous place. So don't wear miniskirts. Wear clothes that will protect you from the violence that we say is inevitable if you dress in a certain way. And then the other argument is saying, aren't we giving in to this patriarchal norm that says women's bodies do not belong to themselves by doing this? Should I not be free to wear what I want to wear? And if someone should then come and attack me for that, there should be protection. Society should protect me. The police should protect me. Someone should intervene and say, this is my body, and I've chosen to dress it as such. And the problem is not with me, it's with you, the perpetrator. So this is what I'm trying to ask again online. If I express myself in a certain way, am I now meant to hide myself, knowing that there are predators online who can come for me? Or should I trust that in the same way that I should trust in the offline space, there are protectors and defenders of my rights of bodily autonomy online?
Okay, please let me respond to it a little. I will soon be going for tea break. And so I think one of the points you raised earlier was the need for service providers to ensure the safety of their users. And so I think that's something we have to look into, and also for enabling laws in countries that will ensure maximum protection for the online users, especially women that are very prone to such concerns, such safety issues.
Yeah, and so I honestly share the same sentiments with you, Fungai. But unfortunately for us, the reality of the times that we live in is that even offline, still, we are victim shamed. So even if it's not your fault, it's your fault. And that's still what's still happening online. But I do think that you can decide, as I have, to say, listen, I really I'm living my best life. And what I want to say, I will not be hinged on any, but you must be prepared for what that means for you as an individual, because I don't see in the near future where that shifts, because like I said, it's still very much embedded in the society we live in. And so, but I do think, and for me, as one of my radical feminist principles is to just live my best life. And so I will not tolerate anybody who comes at me for what I post online, but that's for me as an individual. But I do also very much live with the consequences of what that means. And so I think that's the choice that you have to make as an individual.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we take the final comments, I just want to mention about 3 takeaways for me from this very interesting panel. One of the things that really struck me, and I think that is very important, is for us to be able to ensure minimum safety concerns for women, minimum harm for women online is the empowerment of women. When women are empowered to stand up and take their space, when women are empowered when they go online, they have the power, they have the strength to silence cyberbullies. They have the strength to mitigate some of these issues. And it's very, very important for us to build the capacity of women to ensure laws that protect women's rights offline and online. And also, another very important point for me is changing narratives. I remember just a few months ago, we had a lot of campaign issues in Nigeria around the forced eviction for the slums where our organization work with children. And you know, the government went a long way to criminalize these communities and say they are foreigners, they are illegal occupants, they are criminals, they are kidnappers. But the fact is that there are so many powerful elements in government that want to take over these prime waterfront communities. And so they want to force these people out without any relocation or resettlement plan. And then what they use is to do a lot of propaganda to criminalize this this population that are already vulnerable and marginalized. And we work with so many children that were going to be affected. Some had been evicted already and rendered homeless. And so we started a very strong social media campaign to bring out the reality. There's a $200 million World Bank grant or loan for the upgrade of these communities. And the grant just disappeared the last 10 years. And instead of upgrading these communities, the people were going to be driven out. And the fact that there are interests, very powerful interests behind this eviction. And so we started all the exposure. We started explaining. And then to showcase some of the talent in this community, the fact that these people have human rights, they have rights to shelter. And so our social media campaign became very, very successful. The community one of the communities took the government to court and won the government in their own courts. And so changing narrative. And so now so many people have positive attitude towards many of these communities, and many people are enlightened. So when we shame the people who tend to slut shame women, you know, we change the narratives and people become more enlightened. I think, and then another thing in Nigeria also is we're having a case of a growing trend of violence against women, men killing their wives, and most of these cases is as a result of accumulated years of violence, consistent violence. And many women would not want to leave. They want to stay, so they don't want to be seen as divorcees. They don't want to be stigmatized. And at the end, most of them die in that violent relationship. And so we started a very strong campaign of saying, look, if there is threat against your life, you walk out. It's better to be alive than to be brought out of your matrimonial home dead. You want to stay for the children. At the end of the day, you are dead, and you're not even there for those same children. And so we're having changing perception, changing perspectives, changing narratives. And so I think it's very, very important, even for this same issue. And then the fact that, I'm not sure we really touched on that, for us to hold law enforcement agents accountable. If you are mandated to protect your citizens, especially citizens are very vulnerable to attack, to violence, offline, you have also that duty to ensure their protection online, to ensure that people who violate these people's safety are punished. And so when we begin to shame these people, when we begin to ensure that people are held accountable, I think we're able to make a lot of progress. And then, okay, shaming the shamers. Also, we've had revenge shaming. People bringing nude pictures of their lovers, their former boyfriends, and all of that. We've had cases of that in Nigeria. And then one of the things that has really helped is that even the shamers are shamed. Because for you to bring out such private pictures, it shows that you are irresponsible. And so when we begin to attack that same person, he quickly runs away, and then we are able to prevent subsequent incidences. And then I still want to talk about the need to enlighten boys. I happen to grow up in a very conservative background, a large polygamous home, and then with time I discovered it was a very, very patriarchal setup. My brothers were not using the same bucket with us to take their baits. We grew up in a rural area, and so the buckets, or is it not buckets, that are used for baiting, by the men. We could use that, we could take that to the stream, we could use that to the kitchen, we could use that for several other things. But those for women are kept in one side of the house because they are not deemed, they are deemed unclean. And so even as girls, we grew up with that mentality that, and we began to attach something about uncleanness to women. But it took conscious sensitization, conscious awareness raising for us to begin to overcome some of those things. So it's very, very important to have organized sensitization program for boys as well as informal sensitization. Because the boys that grow up in that kind of patriarchal background, in that kind of anti-women background, they tend to take it to public forums, they tend to take it online, to public spaces. It is a practical part of them. And when you grow up in that kind of environment, and you don't have alternative views, you don't have alternative perception, you tend to think that that is right. You tend to think that it's good to slap women, that is normal because you saw your father slapping his wife or his wives. You tend to think that that is just the natural way to respond to women who challenge you, perhaps. And so it has to take conscious effort to change that perception, to change that attitude, to change that socialization. And we see it in many of the young people we work with. You have to change because we have Boko Haram issue, for instance. People are brought up, some young people are brought up to think that if you kill as many people as possible, you are doing God a favor, and then you have 72 women waiting for you in paradise. That is all the perception, everything they've known. There are no alternative views. And so it has to take conscious effort to change their mindsets, to de-brainwash them. And so I think it's very, very important for us to have organized spaces where boys are trained or sensitized to be more gender sensitive, because you could have just a single person becoming an atomic bomb, causing a lot of harm to women online. And the earlier we engage them, the earlier we change that perception at a very young age, I think the better for every one of us. So maybe we'll take just 30 seconds of final comments.
Well, my final comments, again, I'm just summing up what I've been saying. Like, economic empowerment is a deep issue, and it's deep-rooted in a lot of these issues, especially gender-based violence. So online, offline, let's invest in creating platforms, infrastructures, and tools to empower women and girls now.
Yeah, and for me as well, I think that it's extremely important to join in the fight to create a culture that does not tolerate violence against women, both online and offline. And I do think that there's just considerable work that's being done already by feminists all over the world, and just women who are refusing to allow this to continue. And I think that if everybody was as invested as ending this, and perhaps we would begin to see some real changes. And I think that the internet is a potentially revolutionary tool that we can use to sort of change the tides. And it would be really nice if everybody could just be as radical in ending violence against women as they are in everything else.
Okay, what I'm taking from this panel is the fact that to ensure safety of women and girls online, everyone have to play their part. So for those who work with boys and men, they can educate them. Those who work like women's organization can empower women. Civil society defend the rights. The government and law enforcers to come up with policies that are really comprehensive to tackle those violence against women, and service provider to also come up with some clear results that the user can also use. So, thank you.
Okay, Mila.
Okay. The tech people are about to kill me. Okay. I'll just leave people with practical tips. You know, create a strong password. We know that sharing is caring, but not with your password. So create a strong password. If you have a Facebook account, today just do a privacy checkup. See who sees your information. Select the audience that you want that can see who can see your information. So create a strong password. Enable at least login notifications today, and do a security checkup. And then the other thing also is just violence online creates harm in the real world. It creates economic loss, social exclusion. It also even leads to to all the other issues that we talked about today. And I think for us to have solutions, we all need to work together, partnerships. We also need to remember reporting is very important. There's some issues that people raised here, but always remember that you need to report, and expect feedback from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a hand of applause for our panelists. So, thank you very photograph. Okay. So, thank you very much for your patience and contribution. After now, we'll have a break. Tea break.